Thursday instead of a Wednesday because I can't remember why I scheduled it for a Thursday, but it is what it is. It happened.
Can't remember, then it's pretty clear why.
Yes.
We don't remember it. All right, another meeting. Welcome everyone. So does everyone have anything they want to add to the agenda before getting started?
Not read the agenda. I just want to get progress in the defining schema formats other than async API.
All right. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the agenda because as always, I didn't check. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, thanks for checking. I already have it here, so that's fine. So I found something today that we might want to look at. Something is making noise. Heiko, it's probably your mic. I don't know. Yeah, it stopped. So I think it's your mic. I think it's because you have one of these mics, maybe. No. Okay. So when you move it, it's making this noise. Okay, no worries. So I found something that I want to share with you, and I need to find it again. But it's about the message ID, right? And the name fields. So is this discussion that, oh, damn it. Yeah, stupid me. I'm on a laptop. I'm on the laptop, but the meeting is on the iPad. Okay, so I'm gonna just join as well with the laptop.
But Fran, do you want to bring it up as the first one, or should we go through the other ones first and then come to the message?
Just want to add it. So yeah, you can go to the other ones first. Just want to raise awareness, not necessarily discuss it now.
All right, I added it to the agenda, or yeah.
Or not.
Look, Lucas, do you want to take your item first?
I mean, there's not much to talk about it. Just wanted to, I mean, last time I promised I'll open the pull request. So I did it. And I need review. And for the context, for others, it's related to not $ref. What is it related to? It's related to
Schema reference.
Yeah, the references actually. Yeah. To make sure that in the future we are not, when we introduce non-JSON schema references, will not break async API.
I like how your pull request starts. The description of your pull request says, let's pretend I created a branch in a fork and not upstream, okay? So now you know how it feels.
Yes.
Can you remember, Lucas, why we need this change now and not wait for 3.1?
Because current spec says that we're one-to-one following JSON reference, and the JSON reference is pretty clear that you can't have any other properties, any other fields in the reference object other than $ref. Yes.
But this change, that isn't breaking, is it? Like it's still backwards compatible.
This one?
Yeah.
It kinda is. I mean, it kinda is, because this change now says that it's allowed to have other fields.
But
yeah, it's this kind of weird Is it backwards compatible or not? Is it forwards compatible?
I mean,
It's
it isn't compatible, like, because if we said it's something and now it's something else, then
yeah. I mean,
somebody
the reality is that unless libraries are checking for it, like it must be only $ref and nothing else, then yeah, it's backwards compatible. But if some library is checking that it must be only $ref and nothing else, then it's not backwards compatible. And I'm assuming that many, I don't know if many, but I'm assuming that some implementations might be checking for the uniqueness of $ref there. A uniqueness is in the sense that this is the only property allowed in that object, because they're probably using JSON schema to verify that, to validate that $ref is the only property of the reference object. Probably we are on our JSON schema definition. Probably, maybe we have additional properties false or something like that. So it will be a breaking change.
So
It's-
if in doubt, you basically have to assume it's a breaking change. That's why it's for 3.0 spec.
It doesn't hurt to have it on 3.0. Yeah. Definitely.
So you want to make another breaking change, even though that the freeze period has been in effect for 2 weeks. I'm just asking because at this point, the freeze period is like doesn't matter.
Yes, it looks like it doesn't matter. I mean, we agreed that the freeze period doesn't matter. What we agreed is in a list of things to finish, right? Not a period.
It's like, it's not something I invented. It's related to this issue of non-JSON schema. So we on one of the calls, I think Jesse raised this topic, and we were pretty clear that solving support for non-JSON schema, and we talked about it before the freeze, is too complex. Then it might be not breaking change, but to make sure it's really non-breaking after we release 3.0, then we need to prepare spec for it. So in theory, we're not ignoring the freeze. It's just like this change was related to the non-JSON schema support.
I feel like you're a little bit of a politician now, like twisting the words just a tiny bit to your advantage.
Director now.
It is what it is.
Because it's a small one, I would simply review accept it and it's okay. So
yeah, in theory, it's nothing really. Like, it's a breaking, but it's like nothing is really affected.
Yeah, nothing changes actually. It's
Except tooling, right?
No, again, like, no. I think as far as I remember, JSON schema ref parser, I think it's
not taking it into account. You can have it.
yeah, I think that it's preserving. It's not removing this field.
Yes. Yeah, you can have things alongside $ref, and actually some libraries will actually merge, override the values. We'll consider it as a merge operation. Not sure about JSON schema ref parser, but others do it.
But we agree that with this change, that means that you can now reference protobuf, right?
No.
Or no?
It's not related. Why?
It's about having additional properties on the object alongside $ref. Like, hello, I'm Jonas. This is allowed now.
And this change that I'm doing, it's only related basically to this schema. So it's not related to all the other references.
So the only real change is that you now allow ref to be accompanied by a property. But why?
But why?
Mhm.
So for
Is it-
example, yeah.
Are
So for,
yours?
so it's so because one of possible solutions for the support of non-JSON structures is to still keep the ref, but for example with some additional property that specifies it's actually ref to some protobuf. That can
So
be
we-
one of many different solutions for
So we are
non-
making this change on the assumption that we are going in that direction to allow or to specify additional properties alongside refs, even though that we have no idea whether we actually are.
Yes.
It's just
Ta-dam.
in case we go, it's not a breaking change. Yeah.
And we say that it's a breaking change because it will break the tooling, not as much from a spec perspective.
From a spec, it's not breaking. It's only breaking the tools.
Uh-huh.
I mean, like for me, from spec perspective, it's breaking. Because again, like the spec says that like we had totally different description of the reference object than the open API. So for us, it was just, it's the same as JSON reference. And JSON reference says clearly that you cannot have other fields than $ref in reference object.
It's
Yeah.
forbidden.
But for a
it's
user,
forbidden.
it's only breaking if the JSON $ref for JSON is not working anymore with a new version. So this means breaking. If you allow something additional, it's not breaking.
Like, so in the world where I have some API and I would have an endpoint and I would add a property, I would say it's not a breaking change. But here it's like it's a different, because we were saying that there's no other field. So somebody can, in his code, in the tools, of course, but I don't see a difference between spec breaking and tools breaking. Somebody can assume that there will be no other fields than $ref.
Correct me if
Actually-
I'm wrong, but JSON reference doesn't explicitly disallow any additional property. They just ignore it, right?
As far as I
I
remember,
can't
it's
remember.
using must or
Okay.
should. Must be ignored.
My only comment is I feel like that's a rush, but sure. This change feels like it's a rush.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why?
For the same reasons that for the reasons that we are assuming that this, what's it called, like that this change is needed because we are assuming that we choose a specific solution down the line. That feels like a hack or a premature step to take. But that's just my opinion.
Like, so we either do it or we sit and try to support Node.json schema before we reach 3.0. So we have like there's not always black and
Or
white
we release
solution.
version 4
Not
once
necessarily.
breaking change.
Yeah, with the knowledge of how much effort it is to release major release, I don't expect anything before 2035.
But I think it's also because my assumption of enabling references for non-JSON schemas will not be a breaking change. Like the solution for allowing that is not going to be a breaking change from a spec perspective. It's going to break tooling, especially if they all of a sudden encounter a reference that all of a sudden reference a protobuf file that earlier in the spec 2 or 3 wouldn't be allowed, but now all of a sudden is. So from that perspective, it's a breaking change. From a tooling perspective,
But isn't all newer spec version a breaking for all tooling? So if I put a version like 2.80 in my spec and put it against the current parser, would it be able to handle it?
Yeah, it will just ignore it, but it's not invalid. Yeah.
Okay.
But well, actually, that's a good point. So even preparing the spec like Lucas did, I think it will still be a breaking change in the future, because we will be changing the dollar ref, and dollar ref will be pointing to, I don't know, a protobuf schema, right? And then that value, that dollar ref, will not be compatible with previous versions, right? So that's not backwards compatible. That's gonna it's still gonna be a breaking change, even if we make this change. You're mute, Lucas.
Yeah. I mean, why? Like, so the default is what it is. So it's reference of JSON document.
Yeah.
And then what we with 3.1 we say, okay, but if we have if you provide next to $ref, for example, proto true, then the behavior changes. But it changes only if you explicitly add property protobuf true.
Now,
so it's
the thing is,
breaking
yeah, so it's forwards compatible, but it's not backwards compatible. So your new document on 3.1, this $ref that is pointing to a protobuf file will not be parsable by a 3.0 parser.
Only solution to make it not breaking is putting belong to $ref an external ref attribute, and then you don't have a $ref, you only have the external refs that will be resolved. This is the only solution that would be non-breakable.
Exactly. So what we could do instead maybe is that we can have a reference object that in the future might be like, okay, you can now have $ref or protobuf URL, whatever, or protobuf ref, either one or the other, right? And in this case, it might be backwards compatible, debatable, but still. But if you change the behavior of $ref by a sibling property that the previous version doesn't recognize, then it's still going to be a breaking change. So it's not going to be backwards compatible. That's my point. You know what I mean? If I use a parser of 3.0,
but it will be because in 3.0 you will not have a reference to protobuf.
That's my point.
So it will be, if any converter that will convert from 3.0 to 3.1 will, it will actually not touch reference at all, and it's still going to work, and it's backward compatible.
Wait, so what I'm saying is that if I have not our parser, but if I have another parser, right, that is not taking into account the async KPI line, the version, and so on, the beginning of the document. If I use a 3.0 parser with the 3.1 value, that's going to fail, because the 3.1 value has a reference to a protobuf, and that's not allowed.
3.0 document, you just change version to 3.1?
No, wait. On 3. You have a 3.1 document, okay? And you try to, with the protobuf reference, okay? But you try to parse this document with a 3.0 parser, not our parsers, but another parser that doesn't take into account the version of the async KPI. That's not going to be compatible, because the 3.0 parser is going to try to reference to a protobuf file, and it doesn't even know about the existence of a sibling property that serves as a flag. So it's kind of like, I think it's a breaking change. It's not backwards compatible, because we're
Why why would I expect that parser that supports 3.1 will work with 2.0?
not with
Document.
exactly. It doesn't work with 2.0, but it will work with 3.0.
With 3.0, sorry, yeah.
Because it's
so another case, the 2.3 or 2.4 we added server possibility to specify servers on the operation. So if you add if you have 2.4 document, you have server there, and then you switch your document to 2.0, it's not gonna go through the.
It's gonna work, but it's not gonna break.
Why it's not gonna break?
Servers is gonna be ignored.
You're having additional attribute that is not allowed in your document.
Aren't they? Aren't they allowed? Additional properties?
Only extensions. Like, we're not allowing anything else. What's the point of extensions then? The only additional properties we're allowing is extensions.
Okay, then in this case it's the same thing.
Yeah. Since the very beginning. Yeah.
We never have any backwards compatible, only forward.
Yeah, exactly. We're only having forwards compatibility.
Yeah, okay, so we can add breaking changes to 3.1. Yeah, this is what you said.
This just got confusing.
Yes.
Wait, let my brain calculate. I just got into the loop.
This is the reason why I'm saying I feel like it's rushed. Because I feel like there's some part of the discussion that hasn't been completed yet. And if we're making a change that is an assumption on something that hasn't been decided yet. Yeah.
Yeah, but if extra attributes break, so we're only forward compatible, we can add breaking changes in all versions.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to one of my earlier questions. What do we, from a spec perspective, what do we assume is a breaking change? We still haven't fully declared what a breaking change for the spec is. We just assume that something is.
We have. I think we did something.
No, I added an issue for it, but I don't think we have actually defined it, as far as I can remember.
So as I see it at the moment, between 2 and 3 versions, a breaking change means the spec owner need to make bigger changes to his spec if he wants to migrate from 2 to 3. Because the general structure changed.
Yep. I agree with that.
This would not be the case for $ref changes. The spec owner don't need to change its spec if it don't want to use this feature. So this one is not a breaking change in this case.
Or we were just making bad updates to JSON schema. Because the spec, if you read it, the Markdown document, it doesn't say you cannot have additional properties. It only says that you may extend the object with specification extensions. But it doesn't say you cannot have.
Politician again. Politician Lucas.
Are you saying our JSON schema files are wrong?
Yes, he said.
Yeah, I think he did. Ah, perfect.
I mean, you said it.
No, you did. I just interpreted it so others could understand.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we move this conversation along? What's needed?
So my question here will be for all of you is, does it hurt? does this change hurt somehow? 'Cause I don't think.
You're talking about $ref or the fact that we
No, the spec is correct.
No, I mean
spec-
the JSON reference
specification-
object being more like open to have other properties. Sorry, I got you.
Yeah, specification extension says additional properties needs to start with X minus, otherwise they are not valid. So all new attributes are breaking.
Okay, so it's in the spec.
God damn.
when 3.0 is an opportunity to remove this sentence.
Now, so I'm feeling a little bit of I'm perceiving a feeling of fear of releasing version 4. Okay, so and I can understand because yeah, we're still on version 3, trying to release version 3, and it's a huge effort. But it's true that from 2 to 3, it's been a huge change. So the spec doesn't even look the same anymore. It's looking a lot different. But it doesn't have to be the same for next major versions, right? So we don't have to be really accumulating changes every major version, right? We could be breaking. So the other option, and what I want to suggest here is that let's break the spec more often. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Let's break it more often, regularly, so that we get good at it. And people don't have to be upgrading all the time. Every time we release a new version of the spec, they don't have to rush and upgrade to the latest version. Like you don't upgrade to the latest version of Node.js or Java or anything like that. Like you probably are 3 or 4 or 6 versions behind, and you're happy with it until you need something, and then you migrate to the new version. But why not? Let's move faster. Let's break it faster, so that we get better at it, right? And it's more, yeah, like Alejandro is saying, like you're happy until you're not, exactly. So until you're not happy, and then you migrate to a new version, and you're not gonna be happy because you have to migrate a lot of stuff. But yeah, that's another discussion, right? Like instead of migrating every 2 versions, or instead of migrating every 10 major versions, you can be migrating every 2, and that's completely fine, right? That shouldn't be a lot of work to migrate. Fabulous words, probably, but yeah. And especially with the small changes, like the small change probably will be a breaking change, but what's the probability that it will impact someone? Right.
So
That's
also my opinion, changing $ref is not more breaking than adding a server attribute. So I would say it's completely illegal for 3.1. Because an old spec need not to be touched to be valid for the new version.
I would agree.
Yeah. So maybe the other option is this: like let's not fear breaking changes and major versions. Let's do it more often. If at the end of the year or beginning of next year we're releasing version 4 and version 5 at the end of the next year as well, who cares? I mean, it might be considered a breaking change, but in this case, for instance, what's the probability that it might impact someone? Like, what's the probability of someone having a $ref to a protobuf schema, but using an older parser, right? What's the probability of this? I think it's really limited, right? So maybe, yeah, we can release it as 4 then, but people will not. So people will be happy to migrate because yeah, why not? It's not breaking anything for them.
I agree, but I have one more possible definition for a breaking change. If you take 3.0 spec and just change the version number, is it still valid or not?
Sorry, say again.
If you take a 2.7 spec and put
Yes.
in the first line in your version a 3.0 is and change nothing else, is it still valid or is it made invalid?
It's not valid because we broke the channel.
Yeah, this is how I would define a breaking change. You need to migrate. So in case of the $ref thing, you can take your 3.0 spec, put as version 3.1, and it would still work. It's not breaking. This is how I would define a breaking change.
Yeah, it's not backwards compatible, but it's forwards compatible. Yeah. Agree.
I see that we actually have a PR for the issue that I created. I can't remember where it was actually changed. Oh, it's still open, so it hasn't been decided yet.
No, yeah, exactly.
What PR, sorry?
I've sent it now. It's actually an old PR that's all of a sudden.
Oh, so that's why I recall. I was like, isn't it already in the spec? Yeah, because I was reviewing this PR, but it didn't get merged. Okay.
All right, have a look on that, and then I love how this discussion started out with Lucas saying there isn't much to discuss. This is like a small issue. Is there anything else we need to discuss regarding this, or how to move it forward?
Anyone agrees that $ref would not be a breaking, could be part of 3.1? I would say,
I agree. I think it can be part of 3.1. Yeah. It will not be It will not be backwards compatible, but it will be forwards compatible, and we're not considering backward compatibility.
Lucas, what is your opinion?
Yeah, did we manage to convince you, Lucas?
No, my the CI did not have enough of capacity. I hung basically. I mean, yeah. Looks like that whatever we are doing now with the spec servers example, making changes to ref seems like a not breaking change. Although I'm curious why OpenAPI considered it breaking when they were changing from 3.0 to 1.0 to 3.1, but they have different.
But it's because they changed the whole JSON schema version. That's why.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of this. It was because of the JSON schema version. They adopted the latest JSON schema version, or one of the latest. They were at draft 7 or draft 4 at the time. I don't remember. That's why. That's the real breaking change.
Okay, then. The most important, I think, is I'll make a comment in this pull request from Dule about breaking changes, and specifically commenting on what we talked about today, that actually adding a new optional property is also a breaking change, because we need opinion of other code owners of the spec. And with ref, looks like for now it doesn't have to go into 3.0.
All right. Next one. And we're probably going to discuss this next week anyway, regarding the references stuff. So, yay. All right, Heiko, you're up.
Okay, stage is mine. Huh? I see. Yeah, it's still about. Let me share the screen. It's still about here where we are. Oh, it's back. Where is? Damn. 602. I know the number. It's still about the proposal of defining schema and other. We heavily discussed in chat, and the last we come with is we need custom or non-JSON based schemas for message payloads and message header. So
And headers?
and headers.
Okay.
Because in Kafka, headers are defined as map with string key and byte array value. So you want to define the byte array value in Avro. So you need to define the complete header section as Avro schema.
You can do it, and the schema registry supports it. So that's the thing. So if you have things defined on schema registry, if you have your payloads and your headers on schema registry defined, you don't want people to be defining the same things again on an SXDPI file. You want them to be using $ref pointing to their schema registry, or $ref or some other mechanism, but not rewriting it. And if it's already on Avro format, then it will be possible that you put it on the headers as well, right? Actually, just for Avro and JSON schema, nothing else. So I'm not. That's why I was like, I don't think we should support. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we should support, I don't know, protobuf on headers, right? But just Avro and JSON schema is what makes sense to me here, because of real use cases, right?
But if you open up the can of worms to Avro, would you really restrict it only to those two formats, like explicitly?
Why not?
No, I would say use whatever you want. If you do it, there may be use case for some crazy messaging solution having custom schemas for headers. I would slap everybody using that, but yeah, maybe people like it.
And that's the thing. If they like it, they can open an issue, then we can consider it, and then we offer it in a future version. But what I will recommend is let's go step by step. If we only know about JSON schema and Avro being used in headers, let's just add support for this too. If there's someone else like, hey, I have a custom schema format in my company and I want to use it in headers, okay, open the issue and open the pull request and so on, and we might support it. And it's not going to be a breaking change because you're only adding one more format. So it's okay. Let's not assume that there might be a case. There might never be a case other than Avro and JSON schema. So let's just go for what we know. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, but this would be breaking change then for the spec.
But it's 3.0, yeah. Right.
I mean, regardless, like defining headers with anything other than the async API schema update is a breaking change.
Yeah, but it's 3.0. It's full of breaking changes. So,
yeah.
So it's the right moment.
Yeah, my original proposal is still the same. If I find it.
Was there an agreement on the specific format? Like how you define schema format and schema together?
No, this is the next point here.
Okay.
What I come with is this one here. Spec, come on. Where I defined the schema and I moved the original schema object and renamed it to async API schema and created a new schema object. And the new schema object is yeah. If you just say the schema object is, it's not a schema object.
Not those.
Damn. Yeah, you say, okay, it's the schema format, and the schema would then be maybe async API schema, or would be a string or whatever. Can be everything.
Mhm.
And this element could be have to be beyond payload and beyond header in the message object.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
So if we see example, so you have here schema, you can define schema and components. You say, okay, it's an async API schema. You find your schema here, and you say, hey, there's a tag, you find the schema here.
Shouldn't it be encapsulated in a ref?
Yeah,
object?
it need to be
Okay.
changed.
Okay,
And maybe I find it within here.
right.
Say, hey, you have your payload. Your payload have a schema followed with schema 4. Yeah, it's not very nice here to have schema, but I don't see a better solution here.
Why do I have payload.schema?
Yeah, you don't need it, I think.
Good question. What can payload? Let me double check what payload can be.
Well, payload could be directly a schema, so that's why.
You
I think
remove
it's
payload, maybe from the table.
Payload. Which payload? Where's payload defined? Come on. Payload is the schema. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Payload. The schema I think is wrong here.
yeah, okay. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
so you eliminate this double schema then.
Yeah, I have here
That's
some
cool.
more points to fix, I guess.
That's a cool thing.
Find it anymore. Yeah, sure. Payload can, this one here is wrong as well. So yeah, much to do.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
Is that-
general, it should be.
yeah.
Come on, taxi.
Yeah, there's a few things that's still missing, but I think the overall general ideas make sense.
It should be more like this one here. Schema, ref.
Yeah.
And header. And you also can say, hey, I want here not $ref, I want to have properties. Something like this.
Yeah.
We can hear. Yeah. Or in case say, hey, I have here a payload, and this one is not arrow, it's photograph, and then my schema is a string. And so on.
Yep. The easiest discussion we had so far.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything missing, is there?
No, I guess
No.
the only ugly thing is I renamed the original schema to async API schema object here.
Right.
It's a breaking one, yeah, but I guess it's the easiest one because you can reference the async API schema object to parameters directly, because I see no sense defining parameters in Avro.
Exactly. No, that doesn't make sense. We need one more schema object, which is like something like simple schema object, which is an object that schema that only allows a few properties, like the one we have in the server variables, for instance. That is it's real simple. It's not extracted as an object, but it will look the same. It's just like, I don't know, enum default description and a few more maybe, and that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, still a need for another schema object, like something like simple schema, I will call it, or I don't know, whatever.
For the okay, And this would be extended by the async API schema object would extend the simple schema thingy, or what do you propose?
No,
would be-
yeah, sorry.
I would be
Go ahead.
careful about renaming the async API schema object
Yeah.
to something different or switching between them. Because then it's starting to be real confusing because we have the async API schema object, which is what we have now as the default payload structure, right? And then we need another name for whatever a schema is, right?
Yeah, this one here was previously called just schema object. I renamed it and added the new schema object, but this the new schema object is this thingy here.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay.
Is it okay for you, or do you propose different names?
Yeah, probably different naming. What about we leave schema object? So you rename async API schema object to schema object, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks. So async API schema object will be schema object, exactly, and schema object on top will be something, I don't know, like multi-format schema object, something like that.
Yeah, this is the only reason I renamed this one here is I was unable to find here in speaking or acceptable name.
What about this multi-format schema object? Something like this, because in the end it's about this. It's like multi-format, or maybe we can get rid of schema word in the name, because this one will be about having schema format and schema.
As straightforward as possible.
Yeah, as soon as we find here a good name, I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure if I like this one. So fun.
We don't like the async API schema format and the async API schema object either. So let's try to find something else that makes sense. I don't know. But the thing is that even if we don't like it, at least we are giving a bad name to something that didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Something new.
Yeah, sure. I totally agree.
So that's the good point. Like that's the good part for me. That we are giving a weird name to something new, not to something existing. So.
But this one here would now be more speaking. Because as soon as we support multiple schema objects, this one here is only the async API. No, it's not only the async API schema object. It also can be an open API schema object or an Afro schema object. Then it would be more like JSON schema object. No, it's going to be even more worse. So let's go.
No, this one is not a. So the schema object will only be the one that looks like JSON schema, not the Avro or protobuf or anything like that.
Open API is not permitted here?
No,
At the
no,
moment
no.
you are allowed to add Open API here, not?
No.
Ah, okay.
It's a different thing. It's in a different spec.
Okay.
So, we don't define it.
Yeah, in this case, I would vote for renaming it to make it really speaking. Then
No, but what I mean is a schema object. What I mean is I will leave it as our schema format. Like this is our schema format that is similar to JSON schema and to the OpenAPI schema. It's similar, right? So this is our schema object, right? And then there will be other objects that encapsulate this one or another one, right? So I don't know.
Like,
schema wrapper object.
But to be honest, async API schema object is the best name we can choose, because like now what's confusing is that many people don't even know that they're using async API schema. They think they're using JSON schema.
But to me, it's confusing.
It's
API schema object is going to be confusing because all the schemas, all of them are from async API. We are on async API, so all of them are from async API. So what do you really mean by async API there? Like the new one is going to be from async API. The existing one is from async API. The simple schema that we want to create, it's still from async API. We define it. So you know what I mean? When you say async API schema object, is which one of the three? You know what I mean?
No.
so the differentiator there is the async API in the beginning, right? But all of the schema objects are from async API. So if I only see async API schema object, my first question will be, which one of them? Why is it called async API schema object, and the one that is on parameters and server variables is not an async API schema object? If it's still from async API, we're still an async API. So that's what's confusing me with this name.
So at the moment, the spec says this one here. Components have to look like this. You have a component schema and a component async API schema. And this is the name from the spec. So we not only discuss about this names here, also we discuss about the component section names.
Oh, true. You need to put the schema somewhere else for reusability.
Yeah. So I'm as longer I think about it, as more I like the async API schema section, because it's more speaking. But yeah, it's a pre-breaking change.
But is it really needed that we have components async API schemas? Because I can reference another object on the schemas, on the components, under component schemas. I can reference another one there. I will just have to add /schema at the end to point to the pure schema, let's say.
Yeah, but then you would say, okay, this one here needs to be async API schema if here is async API schema within. So makes it even more complicated. Here makes very clear and simple. Always contains async API schema. And here you have a ref or a string or whatever.
And then it opens the box to why do we have async API schemas under components and not Avro schemas and protobuf schemas?
You will need all of them, right? Technically.
But are we gonna do this? Do we want to go this way? Because I will remove async API schemas, and in this $ref that you have selected, I will point at the end. I will point to some other schema. I don't know, at the end I will put /schema. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what I mean.
So you don't really need it. This is our format. This is our new format. So,
but yeah.
You can remove schema format altogether.
Yeah, just.
The alternative is that we allow schemas to be, that we split those out. So schemas can be anything. If it's part of the components, it can be any type of schema. It doesn't define what the schema format is. And then we have a specific components dot.
You prefer this one here.
I'm just going to call it async API schemas that then define schema format with a schema. And then references can have, I don't know, it's even more complex. Doesn't make sense.
Hey, folks, I'm a little bit concerned because it's basically the end of the meeting, but we haven't actually discussed documentation. So, that's another important goal that I think everyone wants to meet.
It actually haven't been added to the agenda, Alejandro.
I thought you said we were adding that to all future meetings. Remember you said that in the last meeting?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I don't remember for the past 2 weeks. But yes, I was actually gonna suggest that we added another meeting only for docs.
So the last spec meeting, you actually said that instead of doing that we should have another point in this meeting, which is why I'm in this meeting. And I mean, I don't care. I'll learn something new. So I don't mind joining the meeting today for nothing. I don't think it's for nothing, but I want to make sure that we're not forgetting that we actually make time to discuss documentation. So if that's not going to happen in this meeting, then I want to make sure we establish where that is happening.
Yeah, good point. I don't know. So yeah.
So again, yeah, I don't think we need that section like SMTP schemas other components. And
Wait, Fran, you moved on and we didn't finish my point.
oh, sorry, I thought you did. Like, it's
No, we
something
didn't.
agenda,
We haven't
it's
reached the solution.
agenda, so we can
Yeah,
next time I think we can move forward. From now on, what we can do is let's keep adding it to the agenda of the next meetings, because my feeling is that we're not ready for this discussion yet, because we're still like finishing or trying to finish like spec 3, right? So I don't know.
But
That's
we
why
should definitely not queue stuff. So the fact that we don't have schema solved,
okay,
it
so
doesn't
let's
mean that
prepare
the other
another
parts are not.
meeting maybe, or let's schedule time on the agenda, because yeah, I forgot about this as well. Just
no worries. I'm
Good
here to
night.
help you not forget. That's why I'm here.
okay.
So,
Perfect.
because I want to make sure we have an action item here. So what is the action item to move forward with documentation? Are we for sure adding a point in the next week meeting? Are we adding a new meeting? What are we doing?
Let me start a discussion in Slack, and then we figure out exactly where to take it there. And then next meeting, I'll make sure to add at least the docs as well. And then we can figure out whether there is something to discuss and whether there's not. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there was an action. And so then the last thing I wanted to say is I responded, Jonas, to your comment on the request reply.
Let's
And
take it later, Alejandro.
not for now.
Just to,
And
yeah,
I
let's
just
do,
want-
let's do
let
it
me
later,
finish.
so Heiko can finish his point about this specific issue on the agenda. So we can take that in Slack, and then we can continue there.
Yes, but you interrupted when I was speaking. So I was saying that I responded and I gave you extra context that I just needed you to review later and tell me if the extra context I sent, if it's helpful or not. And that's all I had.
Yes, I saw it. Thank you. Sorry, Heiko, go.
Yeah, the problem is we are at the same point at the last call. We was interrupted here. So Fran is proposing this one here. We're having only component schema section where we have schema for element, async API, and within here I have a ref with another schema. It's only called my payload schema here, and here I'm pointing to ref and say, okay, schema formats need to match if to make it valid. So we don't want cascade different schema formats. To allow things like says makes it pretty complicated, because all sub schemas. So if you have here multiple types, need a schema format and schema words. This is what I wanted to prevent. This is why I came as with async API schema word here. Because if you have really much elements here, or much schema elements as a normal schema has in enterprise sections, I have seen nearly 100 objects here in one schema. This extra thingy here makes it more complicated to read. This is why I'm like this one more than this one. What are your opinions? Jonas, Lucas.
That is complex.
I mean, so what is making it harder to read? You mean that the schema is nested?
Extra words here, yeah. So if you have here multiple elements,
it's easy to mix them up, right? Because what if you're all of a sudden referencing a schema that's using JSON schema draft 7, and then you have an async API schema object, and then you reference them across each other, right?
Yeah, but we was saying we don't want to mix schemas. If we use this solution, we need to put in limitations that $ref is only permitted to the same schema format as the one that is referencing. So it's not allowed to mix async API with open API or pure JSON schema.
And even with current spec, it's possible to reference different versions, so it's not a big problem.
Mhm. I think this is the approach to take,
Which one?
like we have here. Yeah. And then we'll need to figure
You
out.
prefer this one here.
Yes.
Okay, just one more point. Huh? Then we say here my options, or no, my parameters. Sorry. You have here same as today. We have here my parameters, and I don't remember where it was here in my message. I say my parameters, and I have a $ref to parameters, and the $ref is only valid if the schema format is async API or not existing. Or we say, hey, we add a new schema format like mini async API, and this one is only valid for parameters.
Yeah, so that's another issue that I will be working on soon. Sorry, it's something that I will be working on. So this is so the thing about that is that it will be another kind of schema, right? Like with what we discussed, like it will be a simpler schema for parameters, and for several variables, we should not be allowing any kind of schema or a full schema object, right? Because it's too much. So
in this
maybe
case, this would be a case, and we just say, hey, in parameters, schema format has to be x, y, z. At the moment, I would limit it to async API schema, and you can later limit it to a smaller subtype.
But even the async API schema is too much for a parameter. That's my point. So parameter is usually just a string or a number, right? Sure. And I never saw any parameter that is an array or an object or null or a boolean. Yeah, sure. So it's too much. So we should decrease the amount of things you can do with parameters, because it's way too much. So. Yeah. Also, if we leave it, we need to define how do you serialize arrays into a parameter, how do you serialize an object into a parameter, and all this stuff, right? So that's another thing.
Would you like to add this change, or is it another change?
That's another change, so don't worry about that. I'll work on that. But and that's probably a change that should happen under parameters. So we have components parameters, so that's probably something that will happen there. I haven't still figured out what or how it will look like, but
for my change now, I would limit for parameters the schema format to async API schema. You would later change it to something smaller.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll follow up.
We have sections where we limit the allowed schema formats. For payload and headers, everything is allowed, and for parameters are only async API schemas permitted. Can everyone agree? Lucas, Jonas, are you talking or?
Yes and no.
What does it mean?
Silent talking.
I'm speaking in my mind, but I'm discussing with myself first, and then.
Yeah, you can make your comments later in the issue, but we need some comments or some agreements from you.
Just could you because I'm a bit lost now. So because right before this full my parameter and GRR, you wanted to say that it's better if we just have explicit async API schema property.
Yeah, it would make it a little bit shorter, but in this case, you would not. You would have here additionally later parameter will lead to this one.
Yeah, but it's not a problem because we know that parameter should anyway be completely
sure.
changed. Yeah.
It was just want to mention, if you want to limit the parameters to a subsection, and we choose this approach here, you would end up with saying, hey, we have here multiple component section. It's just what do you like more? Having multiple component section, each contains only what it's designed for, or having this approach where you always have the schema format and saying later, hey, for parameters, only schema format X, epsilon, and Z are valid. What do you like more?
None.
I mean, if there's any preference, then I definitely I supported the previous idea because everything is coming from the idea from Maciej that we have the schema format and schema. But yeah, I mean, I think that at least I agree that this reference will now look strange, and for tooling providers, it's going to be harder to, for example, use the ref to figure out the ID maybe of the schema, because you will not have the last element of the ref will not be the ID of the schema, but it's going to be schema keyword. So that's the biggest pain with the idea of having schema format and schema under the schema.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even think about that.
I mean, there is another option that we might want to consider, and it's having under schemas, you have under schemas, you can have the schema format directly. So that string, which is like application / whatever, abro, blah, blah, blah. Right. So, and in this case, like inside, so you will not, in this case, you will not need schema format and schema keywords. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. So I'm looking at Heiko type at the same time I'm talking it.
Yeah, I try to understand what you want to tell me and prepare options.
Yeah, sorry. So it just got me distracted. It's just me, no worries. So so it's like it will look something like components and then schemas inside, right? And then right inside schemas you will have async KPI. Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay. And now you need the idea of the schema. So I don't know, food, for instance. Yeah. But now you don't need schema format and schemas. You can type the schema directly, right? Yeah. So if you do it, if you nest it like this, you will not need to add /schema at the end. Right, you will need to put the async KPI in the middle of the path. Let's say, right. Yep. The thing is that so instead of async KPI, if you have something like application avro blah blah blah, then it becomes. It's not that it becomes a problem, but if you really have to use $ref to application / VND blah blah blah, it's going to be it's going to be hard to type because it has a slash element, and slash element in $ref is not it's not represented by a slash. It's represented by a tilde and number one, I think, something like that. So it's really complex.
What? So you propose?
Yeah.
Let me write as like this one. I don't know.
So do it. Yeah, let's. Well, yeah. So if you want to reference there, yeah, that's the point. You cannot paste the slash there. You know, because slash means a different thing on a $ref.
Yeah, this is why I put it in quotes here.
Yeah, so you have to. So the way it works is that you have to replace slash with tilde, the tilde sign. You know, like the one in the ñ. In the Spanish, in España, right? Yeah, it's
I know what you mean, but I didn't find it on my keyboard.
you don't have it on the, yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the number one.
Yeah,
alongside
what
it.
is with the points here?
No. So you have to type tilde and one, number one.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And point?
yeah. So that is a slash. In JSON pointers, so that the reference looks like.
Yeah. And what is the
I
dot
agree.
is?
I think the dot is fine. It's just because you're not using
No,
well.
you're
It's not
having it-
components, not schema. It's slash. You have to use slashes instead of dots.
Slash.
No,
Slash.
no. Wait. No. The other way around. Components slash schemas slash. You know.
Okay. My fault.
Exactly. So the other thing is fine. So the dot is completely fine.
So
And there was something else that I don't remember. So tilde zero is something else, but I don't remember. So yeah,
it's an ugly one.
the only problem with this is that it really looks ugly. That $ref looks ugly and large, right? But that solves the problem of having to put the schema format all the time in every every schema. Well, you have it on every ref, which is probably worse. So, and the problem with having to add slash schema at the end of the $ref.
True.
I don't know. That's another option. Or maybe we can target the most known schemas and be pragmatic here, and we have Avro, Protobuf, blah blah blah, and then we create aliases for those, right? And then we have schemas, Avro, schemas, async KPIs, schemas, JSON schemas, blah blah blah, schemas, Protobuf, schemas, XSD, instead of having the full MIME type, which is going to be hard to reference. For those who are using a different kind of schema that we don't know of, they will have to type the $ref, this long $ref.
Another downside is as soon as you increment a version of your schema, you have to update this as well as all references. You have the schema version pointer. You have
Technically, you can keep it.
In theory, you should be doing it already. Right?
I mean, in theory, nothing changes.
Yeah, in theory, nothing changes, yeah. But, yeah, I don't know. That's why I was saying, like, maybe what we could do is we can have aliases there, Avro, and that will be, I don't know, the latest Avro version, whatever, or a specific Avro version. And then if you want to use a previous one or a future one or something like that, then you need to put the whole $ref, the whole MIME type of the $ref. Do you follow me?
Yeah, I can follow you, but
so the way it will look like this $ref now will look something like components, schemas, async KPI instead of this long string, right? Yeah, we define this a specific version.
so you can say here async API, but for Avro it's going to be more complicated. For async API, you can just say, hey, if you only write async API, it's the same version as defined in the header.
No, it's okay. We for Avro we can just stick to a specific version, whatever we want to choose, 1.9, 1.10, something like that. And then if people want to use a different version, then they will have to do this long $ref so that alias will not work for them. They will have to create the full, alias just for them, a full MIME type.
Okay.
No, but it's gonna be complex. Come on.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that, yeah, I don't know. It's
Writing
not an
versions into a spec, I guess it's not a good idea. Then you would have to say async API like this 30 for 3.0. But still,
no. Async API will by default mean 3. The schema, not 3, the same version as the one of the document.
Okay.
Right.
Avro would say, hey,
as it is right now, basically. That doesn't change.
90. Or because putting a static version number into a spec for Avro, it's not a good idea.
That's my point. You remove the 19 there. You just put Avro.
Yeah, but then you would point the version number of Avro into a spec. So the async API spec version would change what Avro version is mentioned here. For Avro, then
That's
I
my
would
point.
use.
So that's my point. You will have it. You will have to. So that will be defined as 1.9, for instance, right? In this version of the spec, in a featured version of the spec, that might mean another thing, another version, right?
Then the abbreviation I would only use for async API. Everything else have to use the ugly long ones.
So then we're penalizing really. So the majority of our users are using Kafka with Avro, right? Or potentially with Avro. Sorry. So I mean that's what I find usually. So potentially with Avro. So then we're penalizing Avro users.
But
which is
do
big
they
chunk
use
of our-
$ref?
Huh?
Do Avro users use $ref?
Yes, you can use $ref with Avro.
Yeah, you can use, but normally they point to a schema server. It's an external reference.
Yeah, they have to because we don't support it on async API yet.
Yeah. So I guess for Avro, it would normally look like my schema $ref Kafka server.com, whatever. Or I'm wrong. For Kafka, it would normally look like this.
That dot schema stuff all of a sudden sounds really better. Like the initial idea.
What?
The initial idea about having just dot schema always sounds better than any of these options.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is way too ugly.
You would vote for option A. Which option you would vote for, Jonas?
The one where we only have one component section with schemas.
So I
And
think
there's
that's
nothing
one
B.
here, option B.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
But just to clarify this example, can you, for example, remove schema format from line 58? Because it's not needed, right? By default, it would be async API.
Yep.
And the references would have to be adjusted. So it's like line 63 is actually component slash schema slash grr slash schema.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether this is a possible solution, but I'm just throwing it out there. Is it possible to have that we can remove, if you don't define a schema format, but only have the name and the basic structure of the schema? Can you depend on that? Can you depend on a parent? Like if it's referenced from somewhere else, that defines the version on and basically the meta information. But otherwise, it's just defaults to the async API schema object. So it's almost like a union type.
What? Sorry, cannot follow.
So if you, for example, the one thing like my payload Avro schema, that's one way to define it. The next one is my payload async API schema. The next one there, you remove the schema and just inline the properties. Line 57.
No.
Remove the schema.
Yeah, but then, yeah, how should this work? Then it would make the schema thingy optional. So making the schema format optional and say default is the current async API schema version, I can agree with this one here. But making the schema word optional, I don't think it's possible. For a parser, it would be horrifying.
It's not really optional per se. So you can basically see it as multiple ways to define a schema. You can define it with a schema format, with a schema property. You can define it as is. That means that basically just without the schema keyword, and then you default to async API schema object.
So how we called it, yeah. Or
remove line 65.
Yeah, you would say 65. Yeah, I would say as well.
Yeah.
You would suggest this one here. This element can be an async API schema object or an schema object.
Yep.
Can
Or
be select.
all the schema or the async API schema object is basically any. Because then you can inline Avro and you can inline whatever else. You just don't have the information about what it is unless it's used with the schema object.
No, you need to define that. So if you don't give the schema format, so if you want to use this one here, yes, it might be possible, but I guess it's pretty confusing. And I would say if you don't provide a schema format, it is always the current async API schema version have to be assumed. So inlining Avro or Proto or whatever in this version, it should not be possible.
I think there's a slight difference because what I'm proposing is that you rely on a parent reference in order to know whatever you defined within this schema.
Like what we do with payload right now. That the schema format
yes
keyword is on the payload, it's not on the schema itself.
Because in this way, and this is where it gets complex, because for example, tooling couldn't be able to display that schema without knowing what it's referenced from in this schema object. So if it isn't referenced through that, it wouldn't know what the schema is. So that's the complex part. But it will remove all the complex things about having to remember .schema and to have schema format together and everything else. But it just puts a lot of responsibility on the tooling side instead. And it makes it a bit complex for newcomers, because whenever they see the schema, they can't immediately know whatever specification it follows.
And
so
there can be collisions as well between different versions of JSON schema, for instance. So JSON schema might have multiple versions. That you have an object that might look like valid draft 4, valid draft 7, valid latest draft. So which draft is it?
Yeah.
So you cannot really guess it.
This object can be valid and invalid at the same time if you have async API 2.7 pointing in it and another 2.4 pointing on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the only problem. So, but having a union type like async API schema or schema object, not considering it any, right? I think might make sense. So we only on the GRRB we only allow our schema object, our own format, right? So no Avro or anything like that, right? So that will be our own format. If we do it like this, the only thing we will have to watch out for is we will have to see if the keyword schema is there or not. If it's there, then schema format might also be there. So it will be an async KPI schema object, right? Or I'm lost. I don't know if this is the one that.
Yeah, for a parser,
I
it
don't
would be pretty complicated duck typing here. You need to check, hey, is there a schema element? Yes, then yeah. If
No,
there's
I
that's
think-
how it,
yeah,
it's how it is
But-
now, right?
Yes, for Avro, it makes it exactly the same as you have it now. Like exactly the same as option B, I think, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
this option, yeah. So, but for async KPI, you have the possibility to remove the schema, the schema word altogether, but only for async KPI schemas. Which is like, okay, this instead of we don't penalize our users, but we benefit those using schema, async KPI schema objects, which is probably the majority of the cases. Probably, I'm assuming. And it makes things reusable without having to add the slash schema thing, you know.
Yeah, I would go this way.
I wonder what someone new coming into async API would think about what's the most easiest to, or haven't heard of Spec 3.0, what would be the most easy, like being a description, or what's it called, like always having the same structure, like with schema format and schema, or whether it makes sense to have a mix of both, just to simplify the structure a little bit.
Newcomer would prefer having always the same structure.
Yeah, I would
But
say so. It's
easier to understand. But for professionals, this one here is pretty nice one.
Yeah.
And we with schema object, it's with payload or schema, you can have reference or you can have a full schema. So adding another check that we verify, okay, there's no $ref, but there's schema, so we behave differently. That's not a big deal for the parser. And all the cases I know, in case of Avro, it's like it's either some schema registry,
yeah.
or they're just having references, local references to local files. But then even on the CI level, they do some magic with it. They upload them to some whatever servers, and then mutate the references to point to these new locations, all that stuff. So for them, this slash schema will not be a big problem. Unless they
Actually, when you work with schema registry, you have to add slash schema at the end of the URL.
and that's
right now.
that's not the and is it really like this? Because I was just like, during your discussion, I was checking. So the example that you provided in Avro schema parser had this slash schema, but then I also checked the article from one of our community members about schema registry, and her example doesn't have slash schema.
Maybe they changed the API, but at the time I wrote this, the API to get the raw schema, the JSON definition that you download from the API, it's a slash schema endpoint at the end. So yeah. Otherwise, you get like a kind of a wrapper object with more stuff from schema registry, but not the pure schema itself. So yeah, that's what I remember.
All right, we're actually 30 minutes over time. Can we wrap this up in something that's actionable?
So as far as I understand, the best option is option B,
Yeah.
but with a possibility to inline async API schema directly.
I agree.
Me too. Yeah, I think that's the solution that I like the most so far, to be honest.
So I will now clean up my little ugly schema here, put it into the issue, but will modify my pull request for option B as it is here now. Okay.
Sounds good. To me, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, maybe you'll repeat your votes in the issue after I publish this one here, maybe tomorrow, and then I will modify.
Can you ping us on Slack, like in the specification channel, just saying that you made this, we discussed
Sure.
it here, and then just bringing some awareness to it.
Yep, sure.
All right. Sorry for not reaching your issue, friend, but
No, I just wanted to say that please have a look at the issue on the agenda or the issue of positive negative, because yeah, what I'm suggesting is just to rename message ID to ID on the message, just because it's already on the message. So why having message? Right? So it's a stupid thing, but it will be breaking changes. So yeah, that's why. If not, that's completely fine. I can propose to duplicate it, and that's fine. We'll remove it later.
all right. Thanks, folks. See you next time.
Okay.
Bye bye.